Today is Wednesday, October 26, 2011. My name is Frieda Reitman, and it is my pleasure today to interview Rosalie Fisher at her home in Stamford as part of the Oral History Archive of the Jewish Historical Society of Lower Fairfield County. I have been looking forward to this day. The video cameraman is Julian Reitman. Let's start talking about your birth family background. So would you tell us when your mother was born, when your father was born, and so forth?
Certainly. My mother and father were born in the United States, and they were born in, where did we put that information? In the early 1900s. My father was born in 1908, and my mother was born in 1913. They were, not sure how they met, I think it was a blind date, but they were both from the Philadelphia area, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and they were married for a very long time.
And you were born in that area, right?
Yes, I was. I was born in Philadelphia at Temple University Hospital in 1941.
And eventually your family, the birth family included?
My sister, Dina, she's 2 years younger than I am, and my brother David, who is 5 years younger than I am. We all grew up in the house where my mother lived as a child. My mother inherited the house from her parents, and then many years later, when I was 13, we moved out from Philadelphia to Ballackinwood, Pennsylvania. And when my parents were getting ready to move, my sister moved into the house where we grew up. So it was a generational kind of experience for all of us, because my mother was in the house where she grew up, and my sister was in the house where she grew up.
It's really amazing. I don't think I've heard another one like that. That is really interesting.
Yeah, it was nice walking into the house. When I would visit my sister, was walking into my house too.
Well, did she redecorate?
She did, but certain things like a sculpture of my uncle was on the piano, and that's where it always was, and the piano was in the same place, and it just felt like I was going home.
Well, tell us something about some childhood memories.
Oh, lots of childhood memories, mostly with the synagogue. We lived 2 blocks from a large, active congregation called Har Zion Temple, where we walked only because there was never any parking spots. It was not that we were Orthodox, but I was very active, and I attended Shabbat services as a youngster. I went to the gym. It was a sort of a JCC synagogue combined, and I played basketball in the gym and did lots of things. There was a beautiful big library in the gym where I spent a lot of time. It was my Jewish home. So much so that I became bat mitzvah there, and also I attended Hebrew high school. No, not there. Hebrew high school later. But I really enjoyed going to Hebrew school. We went 3 times a week: Monday, Wednesday, Sunday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So we did a lot. We learned a lot.
Did you go to a Hebrew school? I'm
day-
thinking on the public school, or you?
I went to public school, and then after school I went to Hebrew school. Yeah, my mother would pick us up after Hebrew school, and one day a week we would go to Horn and Hardt's for dinner, and that was a big to-do to go out for dinner, to go to H&H for dinner. It was right in our neighborhood.
Was that still an automat like in New York?
It was a little, part of it was automat, part of it was sit down and order from our menu.
And were there many Jews in the community?
The neighborhood where I grew up was totally Jewish. I didn't know anybody who was not Jewish, and the only African American I knew was the man who delivered our groceries. And it was a very secluded kind of insular life. And then when we moved over to the main line, so to speak, I began to know people of different cultures.
Now, how old were you then?
We moved when I was 12.
So the rest of your schooling, you
Yes.
were not in a school that was all
Exactly,
Jewish.
exactly. It
That's,
was very interesting. The houses were all attached. So we were attached to the house on either side of us. They were called row houses.
you're talking about the one you were born in?
In Philadelphia, yes, in Philadelphia. And we played outside in the back, in the driveway area, which was our back, the backs of our houses, and the backs of the houses of the street next to us. So the backs faced the back, and there was a big driveway that went up and down in the middle.
And the high school was,
Oh, that was interesting. I never got to the high school. The high school was Overbrook High School, where Wilt Chamberlain was a big to-do before I didn't get there. When I was in junior high school, my parents decided that it was time to move. That they did not want me to go to the middle school, I think it was called junior high school then. And we moved when I was in 7th grade. So I went to 7th grade, and then I went to 7th grade again. So I really did a year and a half of 7th grade because I was a child who began school in January when we had promotions twice a year. So I did a year and a half in 7th grade and then finished up in Ballyconwood Middle School, junior high school it was called, and then Harriton High School and Lower Merion High School. Those were the schools where I finished.
and then you went to college.
Then I went to college, yes.
So where did you go?
Very interesting, I didn't even put that here. I went to Penn State. In those days, I didn't know I had so many choices. The two choices I had were schools that had the word Pennsylvania in them. Pennsylvania State University and University of Pennsylvania. I did not get accepted to the University of Pennsylvania, but I did get accepted to Penn State. And I was thrilled. I went away for a year, and it was not a wonderful experience. I don't even like to talk about it to my family, but I will say it here. I gained about 15 pounds between September and Thanksgiving, and my mother was not happy about that at all. She was very heavy, and she worked very hard so that her children would not have the same weight problem. And I also did not do well in school. So the combination of the weight gain and had been an honor student in high school, and then college came and I did not do well. I was requested strongly to come home. So I came home and I finished at Temple University living at home, which is not what I really wanted. I loved the independence that I had that year away. And my parents just decided that I would do better if I were home. And I did do better at home. But I don't know if it was because I was at home or I finally found my niche in terms of the profession that I was going for. At Penn State, it was only 2 semesters, and I really didn't know where I was going, what I was aiming for then. So it was hard coming home.
So you were very early in college, after you moved, you decided to be a teacher.
Yes, yes. I always wanted to be a teacher.
You did.
Always. I always watched the teachers I had. I was very close to the teachers that I had in middle school. It was a profession that said that this is what I needed to do and wanted to do. It just spoke to me.
And did you ever encounter anti-Semitism in this period?
No, I did not. I cannot recall any anti-Semitism, or even observing any anti-Semitism as a child.
Was Temple had a lot of Jews in
Yes,
it?
a lot of Jewish kids, And the protocol, so to speak, or the paradigm there was that you should have an engagement ring on your hand before graduation. Well, that didn't happen to me, and some people thought I was a failure because I didn't have that ring, and others were okay with that, but I was fine. I was not interested at that age to find somebody for the rest of my life. It was not important to me, but obviously it was important to the many young women at the
That is-
university.
At that time?
At that time, absolutely. It was, that was the way that women wanted to go.
All right, so tell us how you met your husband
okay.
and where you were then and
Right.
so forth.
After graduation, I stayed home and got my master's degree at Temple University and still living at home. But after 3 years, I got my tenure in Pennsylvania, had a wonderful experience teaching, but I was ready to leave. So that means I was home 6 years that as a young single adult. So after 3 years of teaching, I said to my mom and dad, I really need to leave. I need to be on my own. I need to be independent. Well, my mother was in tears. What will her friends say, and what will they do, and what will they think of her, because her daughter is going and leaving the nest. And she cried the day I left. She absolutely cried. It was really, really hard for her, but it was the best thing for me, the best. I had a wonderful roommate. I had a life of a young single woman teaching and exploring this fabulous city of Washington, D.C. that I adored. I got there in August of '66. In June of '67, I met Dick at a bar. And my life changed that particular day. It was June 6th, a Six-Day War, 1967. We were both at one point watching Abba Eban on television, talking about the launching of the war. So it was a momentous day for us and for Israel as well. And we were married in February of '68, and from then on, we moved around a lot, Dick and I, just the two of us. We lived in Adelphi, Maryland, we lived in Pittsburgh, and we lived in West Orange, New Jersey. My mother said that we were gypsies, and that she didn't have any more room for us in her telephone book. Because in her family, she never moved. She stayed in the house where she grew up, and my sister stayed in the house where she grew up, but I was a gypsy. But she got over it. When we moved to Stanford in 1970, she realized that this was a place where we were going to put down some roots, and I was ready to put down roots as well. So that's
what brought you to Stanford?
What brought us to Stanford. Dick was with the Internal Revenue Service in Washington, D.C., and he was looking for a job, and he found a law firm. No, he found an advertisement for, I forget where he found it, but Colt Industries was looking for someone to be in the tax department, and Dick was a tax attorney at that time. And so we came, no, I'm sorry, that was Pittsburgh. And then Colt was bought by somebody here in New York, so we transferred to New York. Well, he worked for Crucible Steel, which was bought by Colt in New York City. So we came because of Colt, but he didn't stay there very long. He didn't like the tax, the corporate hierarchy, and he was ready to try a private law firm.
But you were living in Stanford?
We were living in Stanford at that point, yes. I was working in New York while he was working in New York, and as two young married people, we would take the train together, and we had a wonderful time. So, let's see. Dick looked for a job in a law firm. He looked at a certain journal that he was reading that had advertisements, and there was a law firm in Greenwich that was looking for a tax attorney. And he interviewed, very interesting, the firm was called Hirschberg, Pettengill, Strong, and Nagel. A very respected firm in Greenwich. We went for an interview. I was asked to come along. I was in the room over here nursing our baby, and he was in the room over here being interviewed by Mr. Pettengill. Now, Mr. Pettengill had a feeling, or either maybe Dick asked if there were any Jewish members of the firm, and it turned out that Mr. Hirschberg, the top lawyer, was Jewish, but did not associate with anything Jewish. I think his mother was Jewish, and then there was one other Jewish attorney, and that was it. So obviously that was important enough for Dick to ask at an interview. Dick went with that firm. He was with that firm for many years, and then he moved on to other things. And at some point, he had his own firm too. But that was a little too stressful for him in certain economic times that were not to his benefit. And he is now working with a local firm called Case, Tush and Santagata. And he's been there 11 years, and he's not going anywhere, he's staying right there. He's doing fine.
That's an interesting history.
Yes, it is.
And at that point, did you meet some kind of anti-Semitism? But you never lived in Greenwich. You were
No,
always
we
living
looked for a house in Greenwich, and we said to the real estate agent, these houses are not, for so much money, the houses, there's not much to this house. Is there another place where we could go? One house didn't even have a bathroom, it had a water closet. And so he said, well, we could go to the next town, which was Stamford. And who knew? Who knew? But now, knowing what I know now, and after we first moved here, I was thrilled to be here because of the diversity of this community. It is very important to both of us not to live in a community that has one or two stratas. I love the multicultural aspect of this community. We both do.
And then, so you already had one child.
Yes. And then Michael came along after we moved here. Michael was born in Stanford Hospital. And Rabbi Aaron Krantz did the bris at our home. We did not belong to a synagogue, but we found out through our pediatrician that Rabbi Aaron Krantz would be available, and he did the bris at our home. And we did not join a synagogue until 1972 or 3, when Beth El moved into its new building. We were never in the old building. I think that was 73, the fall of 73. So we sat in the back row of that big room in the back, the open room, and that was before they had the raised bimas for the holiday. And I said to Dick, we're not going to sit back here next year. And many years later, I was sitting on the bima. So it was a very interesting journey from the last row to sitting next to the rabbi on the bima. It was quite a journey.
Now, your career.
Yes.
You had been teaching, and and I know you eventually went back.
Yes,
So
yeah. I taught in Philadelphia, I taught in Pittsburgh, and I taught in New Jersey, when we lived in New Jersey. When Jody was born, Dick and I decided together that I was not going to go back to work at that point. I did not go back to work until Jody was 15, almost 16, driving. I felt that with her having a driver's license, that it would be a good time for me to go back to work. I did not go back to teaching. I went back as a part-time community outreach worker for Ryle Magnet School, which was a public school, the first magnet school here in town, where our children attended. So it was the oldest building in town. Our neighborhood school was a quarter of a mile away, but I didn't love that school for our children. I loved this old building and these wonderful teachers who were Bank Street trained. And it was like walking into a perfect, as a teacher, I wanted something specific for our children. And our neighborhood elementary school just wasn't that. I liked the creativity, I liked the empowering the children piece of Bank Street. I liked how they connected everything to the social studies curriculum. It was a good place for me. I did a lot of volunteering there, and then I was hired as their community outreach worker, meaning I went around town and told everybody how wonderful the school was.
Now, did that school have a certain number of Jews? And
I don't recall, Frieda. It had blacks, it had whites. At that time, no Hispanics or any other culture. This community was in the 70s, 75, 76, 77. It was either white or African American.
and the teaching staff?
Teaching staff was mostly white.
And were you the only Jew?
Was I the only Jew? Probably, yes. If not, maybe one other. I remember walking over to somebody and saying Happy New Year, but quietly. It wasn't a big to-do. It was, I know that you know that I know kind of thing. And one thing did happen with Michael. The kindergarten teacher was making felt decorations with the children for Christmas, and my Michael Fisher's little Totskala says, "But Miss Geider, I don't celebrate Christmas." Well, and she said, "Well, then you can make a dreidel." And he made a felt dreidel that hung with everybody else's Christmas tree around the room. So they were aware, very aware of that. Not everybody celebrated Christmas. Not like now, but they had a nice awareness, a comfortable awareness.
And to continue on your career.
Sure. Okay, I did that community outreach for about 5 years, and then I decided I was ready to go into the classroom full time, and I wanted to be in this program. I was hired as a substitute teacher for a teacher who had a heart attack. She was supposed to come back in 6 weeks, and she didn't. And then she was supposed to come back in 12 weeks, and she didn't. She stayed out the whole year. And I then was hired full-time the following year. So I was a substitute for 1 year, and then hired full-time for the years after. I was there for 20, in the Stanford Public Schools for 20 years. And had a very, very wonderful career. Enhanced by something called responsive classroom that I embraced. I had a teacher next to me. I loved the way she talked to her students. I loved the activities that she provided. And I said to her one day, "How did you learn all this?" Because it wasn't like anything anybody else was doing. She said, "I've taken responsive classroom training." Well, the next summer I took responsive classroom training, and basically, in a nutshell, it's looking at the academic curriculum and the social curriculum and putting them together with children, helping children to get along with each other, to empower them to make decisions, to work together, to plan together. It's not a teacher-led kind of a classroom. It's a collaborative effort that the teacher makes with the children to bring them into the process of learning.
And this was a public school?
Yes.
And it was the only public school in Stanford that did this?
Well, that's a good question. When I took this training, I was still at the Bank Street school called Toquam. And as the years went by, I became a trainer, a consulting teacher for responsive classroom, and I went and we trained 500 teachers in this community in Stanford to use this approach. It's not a program. It's not something that you take out of a box and do what it says. It's an approach to anything that you're teaching, and the way you talk to children, and the way the children talk to each other. So I became more and more involved in responsive classroom and realized that Toquam was not the best place for me anymore. So I transferred to K.T. Murphy, which was a responsive classroom school. And that's where I spent my last 5 years working.
And did the superintendent of schools
Embrace? The superintendent then did embrace. There was good funding for training for these 500 teachers and for paying us. At this point, there is no responsive classroom in Stanford. All the years and all the hours that we've spent, it's not here anymore, and it has to do with money and time and different approaches to education.
Okay, now I'm going to move to the community involvement.
Okay. Most of my community involvement is with the synagogue, with Temple Bethel. and has been for many years. Dick and I served on the youth commission. Dick was in the men's club, I was in the sisterhood. Rabbi Goldman once asked me if I wanted to be I think he asked me if I wanted to be the president of sisterhood. I said, no, I don't want to do that. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. And he was trying to find the right person. I did a lot at Bethel. I still do a lot at Bethel. I'm very much connected and engaged with the process. My latest effort has been to establish a preschool at Bethel, which took a couple of years, and we now have a lovely preschool with an amazing director who is got a Jewish heart. She is fabulous in terms of Judaism and bringing Judaism into the school. What else? I'm on the board of trustees still. I sit on the executive committee. I've worked on the 90th anniversary celebrations, the short-term projects, the parties for the Goodbye Party for Hazan, Rabinowitz, and lots of events. Recently was the 90th anniversary, but my heart is very much connected to the synagogue.
So what was the process that brought you to being the first woman president of Bethel?
That's a really good question. I was on the board of trustees for a couple of years, and then they asked me to be the secretary. And as the secretary, I was immediately on the executive committee. And being a secretary is, to me, was always a woman. And I think I was the only woman around that table at the time. So it fell to me, let's put it that way. It fell in my lap. And I didn't say no. I was the secretary for 2 years. And then there came a time when the president then went around the table. He was looking for someone to succeed him. And he went around the table and he asked members of the executive committee, would you like to be president? Would you like to be president? And they all said no, 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 no. And when he got to me, he says, oh, you haven't been around long enough. And he went to the next person. And he was right. I haven't been around as much as many of them, but he didn't get any takers at that moment. So the meeting was adjourned, and on the day of Ethan Hammerman's bris, Rabbi Hammerman's son, first child, the president took me aside, come over here, I need to talk to you, and offered me the presidency of Temple Bethel. And I was overwhelmed by the request and honored by the request, and I was like, I need time. I can't give you an answer right now. I got to think about this. I want to think about the bris, and I want to enjoy this thing. And within a couple days, and after talking to some people, like Dick, my darling husband, and some other people who I really value their opinion in terms of the temple, I decided to take this responsibility. Now, by doing so, I was the first woman president. But I've always said that I was the least best candidate. I don't have strong financial skills. I have good people skills. I understand the workings of the temple, and I'm a participant in the life of the synagogue, but the finances were not my expertise. So I really wasn't the best candidate, so I was the least best candidate. It was a very difficult 2 years in some ways, and those ways were here at the house. The phone rang constantly, and it was always for me. And my dear husband didn't have a lot of patience or tolerance at times. Even when we walked into the synagogue, people came at me with what about this and what about that, and Dick was not, he just felt that it was taking up too much of my time. The second year that I was president, it's a 2-year term, we went away to Montreal for a long weekend because we needed time together. And that was really an example of how much effort it took me. I was still teaching full-time and being president of the synagogue. And it was it was hard. It took up a huge amount of time. I didn't do anything else those 2 years in the community, nothing, except be the president. And being the president and working is much different than being the president and being retired, which our previous president was, Eileen Rosner. She spent a lot of time at the synagogue and still does. And the president before Eileen was Gary Lesson, and he sort of did it remotely by computer. But I didn't even have a computer that I could back and forth email. Just my connection to the temple during those years was telephone. And they didn't even require me to connect the way our previous president and the presidents before have done. The office was run, the rabbi did his thing, the cantor did his thing, and there wasn't a lot of intercommunication. I was called in when there was a problem, when somebody needed to talk to me and unwind about something and try to solve a problem. That's when I was called in. But the day-to-day work, no, I was not involved in the day-to-day. We didn't even have an executive director in those years. So it fell upon Grace in the office to take care of everything.
Do you feel that there was any feeling that this was because you were a woman, or?
No, I think that's how all the presidents before me were. I think that they were available as needed, but they weren't needed a lot.
I see.
And that's how I saw it. I knew what was going on, I knew what was happening, and I knew the issues, but I was not called on a daily basis into the temple for any issues.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was. It was much different than now. The presidents now, and I think a lot of it is because of technology. They go back and forth on emails, and they text, and they have all these group telephone calls kind of things. I forget what they're called. But the technology has helped the people involved in the synagogue to communicate more easily.
It's interesting that you said the prior president was retired when he took. But there must have been presidents who worked and.
I'm talking about the prior president presently. I was talking about Eileen. The prior president for me had been working. He was working.
Okay.
Yeah, but he was self-employed, and if needed, he could spend a morning at the synagogue, and I could never spend anything. I couldn't even go to morning minyan. I was at school at 7:30, working, and I sometimes worked until 6 o'clock. So my day was consumed by school, but I had meetings almost every night, those 2 years. Lots of, I tried to get to all the meetings, the committee meetings and the school meetings and everything meetings.
And you got to the discussion group
Yes, I did.
meetings.
Yes.
You might talk just a few
the
words
discussion.
about that.
Yeah. The discussion group, when we came to Stanford, had been functioning for 20 plus years. And we came in 1973. So it's been around a very long time. At some point, early in the 70s, there were two discussion groups. One younger, one older. And Dick and I were in the younger group. But the younger group didn't make it. They just fell apart and didn't continue after a couple of years. So Dick and I said, we want to stay. So we joined the older group, and have been a member of that group ever since. And for 2 years, I helped to facilitate that group as well, and organized the meetings and the topics and the locations for that experience. For many of us, it's a very nice way of getting to know and learning and getting to know people in the synagogue. It's like a chavara within. That's what the original intent was years ago, to have a sort of a chavara within the synagogue, where you can see the same people and get to know the same people. And in our discussion group, the members are the presenters. So that's been wonderful. We have members with many different skills. Julian's done many, and Dick has done, and a lot of people have done their own presenting. And we bring in guests as well. But our group is very capable of bringing in and arranging and designing an evening of discussion.
I noticed you wrote down something about a pastoral advisory
Yes.
committee.
Yeah.
What's that?
That is in Stanford Hospital. The person who's in charge of pastoral care is Reverend Ann Schmidt, who I have known for many years. She asked me 2 years ago if I would be interested in joining this pastoral advisory committee. There is a pastoral training that goes on at Stanford Hospital. Davi Daniel Clipper he's the teacher, he's the leader of that group. And he brings in candidates who are wanting to be pastoral advisors in their church or in their community. Many of them are clergy, but not all of them are clergy. Suzanne Horn, for example, has taken his training, and she's a volunteer pastoral advisor. They go to see the patients. It's not like hospice. They go to see all patients and any patients in the hospital, and visit with them and pray with them and just help them feel better. That's what these people are trained to do. So I sit on the advisory committee that helps with the training of these interns, they're called, and they get a lot of training.
Boy, all these interesting things that I didn't know about.
That's because you haven't been a patient at the hospital, thank goodness. Stanford Hospital?
Well, I was once.
Yeah.
I don't remember, but it was fine. So, leisure activities.
Leisure.
And I don't know if you want to say anything more about your children. Were they at home when you were? They had left the house already when you were doing this.
Yes, it was just Dick and me at that point. They were gone, and maybe Jody was here because 93. I was president in 1993 to 95. It could be Jody was home for a little while after college, and she could have been here for a little bit, but not for long. But the issues were mostly with the two of us and the telephone. The telephone was sitting there right between us a lot.
Neither of your children live in Stanford, right?
No, one is in Boston and now one is in Burlington, Vermont. Not too bad.
Not too bad. And so your leisure activities?
I love to walk and to do day hikes. I love to read. I enjoy bike riding. I enjoy quilting. I've been doing a lot of knitting of late. Since I retired, I went back to my knitting and really am enjoying that. My mother always had something in her hands. She taught me how to cross stitch, she taught me how to knit, and I think I've inherited the joy that hand crafting brings me. When I wear a sweater, when I see somebody wearing something that I made or something on the wall that I made, it brings a lot of joy to me. There's a tallis bag over there that I made for Michael that's on the wall that I framed, and I made that. It was probably my last needlepoint piece that I made for him for his bar mitzvah.
Well, if you want that, picture of that, we can do that.
Sure,
I think.
I'll be happy to share that with you. It's right there on the
You
wall.
have done some traveling.
Yes, we both enjoy traveling tremendously. We've been to Israel, we've been to Europe, we've been to California, we've been to many of the national parks here in this country, we've been to Canada, and this past summer we went to Ocean City, New Jersey to celebrate my 70th birthday. It was my choice of where to go and how to go. We rented a house that was enough for 9 of us, and we spent a week together on the beach and biking and kayaking and just hanging out together, eating together, and walking on the boardwalk and going to the amusement parks and all the things that I did as a child. When we were kids, we went to Atlantic City, with my family, and we did all of those things together. And I wanted to, again, to honor the history that my parents gave us by enjoying something very relaxing on the beach. And we did. We had a grand time. We flew kites, we did all kinds of things. Loved the water, the ocean.
Do you have any reflections that you'd like to add to that? I was wondering, you have lived in many places and taught in a number of different places. Do you have any picture of Stanford relative to other communities that you'd like to share?
We have, in our travels, often said to each other where we would like to live during our retirement. We have not found a place that we love more than Stanford. The only place that I would consider is Asheville, North Carolina, but that's too far from my children and grandchildren, so it's really not an option. I would like to grow old and die in this community. I really would, and have someone come and visit me from the pastoral group, and go to hospice if I need to, if we still have hospice. This community is, I think as I get older, it's more important to me to have the diversity. And right now, I'm teaching part-time adults. I'm teaching English to adults in the school where I finished my last 5 years of teaching. So children are important to me, and learning is important to me, and teaching is still important to me. I'm not working full-time, I'm working part-time, and it's perfect. I do some tutoring for Stanford Achieves in a small group setting, and I'm not done teaching. I just was done teaching 10 hours a day, and now I'm just doing 2 hours a day, and it's perfect, absolutely perfect. I didn't mention, volunteer for the Democratic Party here in town during election time, and I've done that for years. And I think that's it in terms of my Stanford life. I don't want to go anywhere. I like it right here.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
And if there are some pictures that you would like,
Yeah.
You can, we'll talk.
Is a Tallis bag that I made for our son Michael Fisher. I think Harriet Lacker helped to design it for me. I know she did. And he used it for his bar mitzvah. And it says on the bottom, Shmuel Aharon ben Shmuel Aharon. So it looks like Michael's Hebrew name is the same as Dick's, which is interesting. I don't think I remembered that. But this is the wall in Jerusalem, and this is the menorah. And this is the dove. This symbolizes peace. The other thing I have worked on is the chuppah in our synagogue. I helped with that. On a Thanksgiving Friday, they brought me the chuppah and they said, "You are doing the doves. And we'll be back on Sunday to pick it up to take it to the next person." And Judy Fishman did something, and a lot of women did it. And it was used for Norma Mann's daughter's, her first daughter's wedding was the first time the chuppah was used. A long time ago.
A long time.
Yeah.